Good Friday to you on this Labor Day weekend. If you're already in your car heading somewhere, drive safely and enjoy the end of summer. I want to begin today by talking about something very boring and then something very difficult to talk about, the Minneapolis murders, and then go to our guests. We got a lot of great guests today: Jim Garrity, Matt Continetti, Ben Domenech, Eli Lake. We've got president of Hillsdale College, Dr. Larry Arnn, and the Hillsdale Dialogue coming up. But I want to start with something that's very boring but very important. Actually, two things. President Trump is testing conventional wisdom again and again. He has fired a member of the Federal Reserve Board for what he calls cause, which is mortgage fraud. An allegation of mortgage fraud has been proved against board member Cook. But there's a bigger issue, which is, does the Federal Reserve actually provide any protection to its members? Now, the president has cloaked his firing of board member Cook in the for cause category, but the more interesting question is, does he even need for cause? Now, the National Reserve Act, I think it's 1917, which established the Federal Reserve, that does require that members of the board of the Federal Reserve not be removed except for cause. But the Supreme Court has ruled already that the for-cause requirements having to do with other independent or so-called independent agencies, there really are none in the view of an originalist like me. You're either in the executive branch or you're in the legislative branch, like the congressional architect or the congressional librarian, or you're working for a member of Congress. But if you're in the executive branch, you're either a civil servant or you're a political appointee. If you're a political appointee, the president can fire you. That's my view, and I'm sticking to it. And the Federal Reserve is neither fish nor fowl. It purports to be an independent agency, but it controls the monetary policy of the United States. Now, the president has said he is firing Ms. Cook for cause because of alleged mortgage fraud, and that would be cause, but the allegation may not be enough. But I don't think you need the allegation. I think the Supreme Court doesn't want the president to do this, but when push comes to shove, I think there are going to be 5 members of the Supreme Court who argue that, like the Merit Systems Protection Board and like the National Labor Relations Board, on which the court has already ruled, the idea that you need cause to fire someone in a senior political position is hoo-ha. Constitution doesn't provide for it. If you want to make a fourth branch of government, amend the Constitution. That's boring issue number 1. I wanted you to know that. Boring issue number 2. The president has impounded via pocket rescission about $5 billion in spending. And he did so under a theory of the Budget Impoundment Act that Russ Vought is the very smart head of the Office of Management and Budget, and he has dubbed this a pocket rescission because the Budget Impoundment Act provides a very complicated process by which the president can request a rescission of funds, but if he doesn't get it, the funds have to be spent. In this case, the president is requesting the rescission of funds, but there's not going to be enough time for the rescission of funds to be acted on, and therefore Russ Vought and the president are going to deem them rescinded. That's new, and I think, by the way, it's constitutional. I've never liked the Impoundment Act of 1974. It was passed at the nadir of presidential power after President Nixon entered into his Watergate troubles. I've never thought it was appropriate. I've never thought it was constitutional. I don't think a president has to spend every dollar appropriated by Congress. But those are both open questions of first impression. And so if anyone is telling you one way or the other that they know what the answer is going to be, they're lying to you because nobody knows, because they're questions of first impression. They haven't gone to the Supreme Court. Now I want to go to last night. I was on Sean Hannity's show, Jason Chaffetz sitting in, and my old friends Guy Benson and Mary Catherine Ham and I made up the panel, which was unusual. I've never appeared on television at the same time with Mary Catherine and Guy, who used to routinely sit in for me when they were not under contract anywhere else, and they would do my radio show. And so it was kind of fun. First time we'd ever done it, but it wasn't fun because the subject matter was grim. Let's pick up with cut number 3, the segment last night from Hannity.
Mary Catherine, in your life in particular, I heard you speak about this earlier. Share with us the power of prayer in your family.
Well, I wish this were a straw man. It makes me sad that it's not, that people are explicitly expressing this, who are public figures, who are very open about the fact that prayer should be denigrated at this moment. I find it mystifying. I don't know why they have chosen to go down this road as their sort of safe talking point. It's not a safe talking point. Many Fox viewers know, and I appreciate their prayers for me as well. I am unabashedly praying, by the way, for the families affected by this. Many Fox viewers know that 10 years ago, my family suffered tragedy. My husband died in a cycling accident when I was 7 months pregnant with my second child. The prayers of the people who are likely watching right now lifted my family up. We prayed without ceasing. The promise from God is not that you pray and everything is rectified, or that everything is prevented, or that every earthly pain is taken from you. The promise is that God is with you, that the Lord will guide you through what you have to live through on this earth. And I found that to be true in my life. And the idea that for people of faith who were attacked on this day, that we would say praying for them is somehow inappropriate, I think is actually perverse and cruel, because they were engaged in this tenet of their faith when this happened. And so I thank all those who prayed for me, and I will be lifting up those who were affected by this.
Well said, and thanks for sharing such a personal story. Guy, I think a lot of people who do believe in the power of prayer and have been buoyed up, my family included, they're sickened to hear people attack other people for exercising their fundamental right and mocking them for engaging in prayer and offering prayers for others.
And in the face of senselessness and despair, prayer in the presence of God can be a source of strength and comfort when little else is available. And the thing is, I understand that some people on the left think that thoughts and prayers are not enough, but I don't know anyone across the spectrum who's making that argument. Who's saying thoughts, prayers, and that's it? Nobody. It's thoughts, prayers, and action. The difference is we don't necessarily agree on what the actions ought to be. What would be constitutional? What would work if we're talking about gun control, if we're having uncomfortable conversations about the trans community, whatever it might be, there will be divisiveness, there will be disagreement, politics will come into play. Fine, I understand that's part of what we do in a free society, but the starting point could be, should be, prayers. And denigrating or demeaning that in any way, I think, is just so counterproductive and deeply off-putting to most Americans.
Hugh, you know, it's usually, at least been my life experience, that Democrats have been the one out there preaching diversity. They've been preaching tolerance. You see coexist bumper stickers. But then something horrific does happen, and prayers are offered, and those get mocked almost immediately. I just don't understand the intellectual inconsistency of the Democrats and the far left who mock Americans for exercising their basic rights.
Jason, good evening, and it's interesting to be here with three friends of mine who I know are all people of faith. I think it's very, very hard in a moment of tragedy to say anything that is helpful to the parents and the family and the friends of the victims and even those who are wounded and suffering. It's very easy to say something to injure them more deeply. And therefore, I've been trying to be very careful about this, but I don't know why people feel obliged to denigrate the very thing that the victims' parents and family and friends are probably doing right now, given that those kids were at Catholic school and at Mass. So I think that there are a few things that people like Michael Steele, I've known for a long time, would like to have back. I'm sure you wish he hadn't said that. I'm pretty sure that Jen Psaki wishes she had not said that either. But it might serve a purpose if people, learn from this moment that in tragedy there is no upside in mocking whatever anyone believes. They don't have to believe the Gospels. They don't have to believe the Psalms or the book of Job. They've just got to respect the fact that most Americans do, and especially the victims in this case did, and their family who are suffering very, very deeply most certainly are in prayer a lot right now, and they don't need to be mocked. It's simply anathema, actually. It's sort of repulsive, but I'm sure it was a mistake on the part of some of the people who are quoted and that they wish they could have those words back. They certainly do, and I'm going to talk about it with Jim Garrity. I'm going to talk about it with Matt Continetti. I'm going to talk about it with you. Want to remind you the Salem News Channel is up and running, and I hope you are watching us on the Salem News Channel and that you continue to through the entire 3 hours. I will come back with Jim Garrity and also right after that, Matt and Eddie. We got lots to cover today, including reactions to the shootings, but also the Cook issue about whether or not she can be fired. A bunch of fun stuff from Ben Dominich's Big Ben podcast as well. There's much ahead on today's program, so don't go anywhere. Stay right where you are listening to, especially if you're on your long Labor Day drive. Stay awake, stay attuned, slow down, get there and enjoy the weekend. I'm Hugh Hewitt. You know that music means Jim Garrity, Washington Post columnist, National Review contributor, usually on the editors, but not on the editors yesterday. So, Jim, I don't know what you were doing yesterday, but they needed you on the editors yesterday. They brought in Jack Butler from the bullpen, who is Hugh Hewitt trained, and we love Jack, but I would have liked to have heard your opinion on these things. But I'm going to go immediately to the worst topic possible, the school shootings in Minneapolis. And I want to preface this by telling you, I spent the whole first segment talking about this and my commentary on it last night on the Hannity Show. Jason Chaffetz sitting in with Guy Benson, Mary Catherine, and I. And my comment was, it's very easy to say something you regret when you talk about school shootings. It's very hard to say anything that brings anyone any solace or comfort. But I do need your reaction to this. Minneapolis Senator Tina Smith, or Minnesota Senator Tina Smith posts a quote, "Do not offer thoughts and prayers as you systematically enable such tragedies. Do not claim prayers are sufficient when children die as they pray. Please do not pretend you understand. Lydia, 19. No comments from Senator Smith, but she posted it. What do you think about that?
So your listeners know that I am 99 times out of 100 opposed to gun control proposals. I think they're a really ineffective response to what is ultimately a mental health and, just flat out problem of evil. But if, let's say you're a strong gun control supporter, you don't have to denigrate prayer. You don't have to denigrate turning to religious faith and your religious community and God at a time when you've seen the most horrific thing imaginable, right? If you want to say, prayers aren't enough, fine. Some people have been wise enough to put it that way, but I think some people, including Jen Psaki and a couple others, have crossed over into it with the kind of this sneering, mocking tone of this. And it's never a good idea to mock prayer. It's a particularly bad idea after an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old have been murdered while they were praying in a church. I completely get what you said, Hugh, about not wanting, this broke while Greg and I were taping a show. We were actually interviewing Curtis Sliwa, the mayoral candidate in New York City, the Republican, the only decent option in the entire state. And it was the only entire decent option in that race. And news breaks, and we just mentioned it very quickly and say, we're really sorry to hear about what's happening out of Minnesota. Details are still coming in. I like to wait, if possible, 24 hours before something like this, because a lot of rumors and stuff is floating around and all that kind of stuff. I've noticed, I feel like there are certain people when a mass shooting occurs, they feel a need to jump in. They feel a need to react as quickly as possible and say, this is Republicans' fault. This is Christians' fault. This is gun owners' fault. This is your fault, my political opponents. And I don't think that, one, doesn't help anybody. I don't think it makes anything any better. Two, it's, I think, a smear. It's false. And yet, I think there is this eagerness to set the narrative. There is this eagerness to insist, this is why we need the gun show loophole, even if the shooter didn't get their guns from a gun show. It's just almost this very familiar script. And I feel like the inherent instinct of decency to want to wait before you come out and say something is somehow works against us. Because if you actually do take the time to wait,
that.
Well, yeah, sure.
Do you think that is combined with the progressive left's slow descent from secular absolutism, meaning that there not be faith in the public square, which has been crushed by the Supreme Court, into an active anti-religious attitude that is redolent of Marxist, Leninist, anti-religion? I mean, that's part of the ideology of the hardest of the left. Do you think that is creeping in and taking over America's left?
In some corners, indisputably, Hugh, although I'd say it's odd. Do you ever hear him complaining about Muslims?
Of course
no
not.
protests
No.
outside mosques. No.
No.
Funny. That's the one religion they never seem to get all that upset about. Going back to Hugh, you and I have been doing this for a long time. Remember the Muhammad cartoons? Remember,
Yes. Charlie
right?
Hebdo. Charlie
right,
Hebdo. Yep.
but yeah, so like, let's this way, it's a free country, and we have had people who have not been believers in this country since as long as we've had Americans, and the Constitution protects your right to not be a believer, be a non-believer. However, freedom of religion does not necessarily mean freedom from religion, and your right to not practice religion cannot interfere with somebody else's practice of their religion. Time, place, your law. You know the law very well. You think you get the general gist.
So that leads me to the next question. Before the tragedy in Minneapolis, there was comedy. There was the National Democratic Committee met. They began with a land acknowledgement, which is something of a secular religion, and then it descended into chaos. They couldn't pass anything, and they were left-wing driven. Is it collapsing? Are they going the way of the Whigs, Jim Garrity?
It'll be a long, long time before the Democratic Party, collapses or disappears. It probably is going to morph. It's probably going to transform. It's probably going to change. I think there are a lot of Democrats who are much further to the left than, say, Joe Biden, who, if presuming Mamdani wins, that they're going to say, what worked in New York City is going to work all across the country. Let's run socialism and communism in a Senate race in North Carolina or in Iowa, since apparently Joni Ernst is going to retire. Let's run in that congressional seat in Omaha, Nebraska. This is going to, my guess is that will not work very well at all. Having said that, you look at the polling numbers amongst Generation Z and young people, they aren't as reflexively opposed to socialism. They aren't as reflexively opposed to communism. They have no memory of the Cold War. This is something that's ancient history for them. And so, like this poster behind me, "Bedtime for Brezhnev," right? This is to them what World War II was. Being a Generation X like me, it was something that happened before their time, and so they can't grasp the degree to which, like, their idea of socialism is maybe, if they're on the really good day, they'll say Norway, which, oh, by the way, has a whole lot of oil and gas revenue to finance all of their social spending, right? They have this idea like, it's going to be nice, kind, gentle stuff, even though every time you start doing anything resembling communism, owning the means of production, as Mamdani said, it always ends up with gulags. It always ends up with disaster and a search for scapegoats and, liquidating the gulags and things like that.
What 1 minute, Jim? Mamdani wants to get rid of misdemeanors. Do you think he's ignorant or that ideologically committed to chaos?
One of my things about Mamdani is that he is, not just a socialist, an out-and-out communist who also supports globalizing the Intifada. Like it's all bad news with him all the way down. But I think people like who are in the New York City area really are terrified of what his view is going to be on crime, because in addition to being soft on crime, there's a strong suspicion that Mamdani will have zero interest in enforcing the law against violence that comes from a left-wing direction. So if you're, say, the Israeli consulate, let's say if you're a pro-Israeli business, let's say if you're any big business, a big chunk of the young, angry left was cheering the assassination of a health insurance company executive. Now, imagine, when that attitude spreads through New York City, how hard will the Mamdani administration crack down on left-wing violence, protests that turn into riots, things like that? He's basically openly announcing that, when he gets in there, law enforcement's going to get even more politicized.
I don't know if it's Curtis or if it's going to be Eric Adams. One of those two has to drop out, because if they're both in, it's going to be Mayor Mamdani. Jim Garrity, thank you. Listen to Three Martini Lunch. The editors read them in the Washington Post and National Review, The Morning Jolt. Matt Continetti is, of course, a columnist for Commentary Magazine, for the Free Beacon, and now for the Free Press. He's also a regular participant in the Commentary podcast, and he is the senior fellow for domestic affairs at the American Enterprise Institute. Matt, I want to begin with a post by Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota yesterday. She posted a quote. The quote read, "Do not offer thoughts and prayers as you systematically enable such tragedies. Do not claim prayers are sufficient when children die as they pray. Do not pretend you do not understand. Lydia, 16, Minneapolis." Now, Senator Smith added no comment. How do you interpret that, and what's your reaction to the general anti-prayer reaction on the left, Matt Continetti?
Well, my reaction, Hugh, is outrage and a large measure of befuddlement. You know, President Trump and MAGA have a knack for making Democrats defend the indefensible and attack the commonsensical. And in this case, the response by so many Democrats to the horror in Minneapolis has been to somehow denigrate prayer and, by extension, Bible-believing religious people. And that's a large part of this country. That's almost a super majority of this country. So I think it's clueless from the Democrats. I think it's condescending. I think it's an empty ritual on its own to simply attack prayerful people after every time we have one of these awful events. This shooting happened in a state that has remarkably strict gun control laws. And all of the firearms involved in this just awful incident were purchased legally. So what is it liberals are saying? What is it they're for? All we know is that they're against, and they seem to be against either talking about the trans identity of the shooter, and they're against prayer. This is an untenable position for the left.
I have a theory. I'll test it out on you, Matt, because you're about as bright as anyone around. The Democratic Party was a liberal party that was built on the Catholic working people, especially the Catholic working people of Italian and Irish ancestry who went to Mass. They moved into a left-wing party over the last 20 years that became secular absolutist, especially on issues like abortion, where they didn't want any religion in the public square. And now they've ended, the end stage leftism is to go full Marxist-Leninist and hate religion. Are they dancing on that cliff?
I think some parts of the party are already there. They're off the cliff. I think you're right, Hugh, to point out that the most telling divide in this country is over religion and over whether you identify as part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, whether you affiliate with a specific church, whether you regularly attend religious services or not. That question alone explains a lot of our political divide and a lot of our political positions. And so I think we've seen in some of the expressions from the left and from high-ranking Democrats since the shooting in Minneapolis has been just a revelation of their far left secularism, and not just a view that religion shouldn't be in the public square, but a really menacing attitude toward religion in general, to mock people praying for the victims and for the families of the victims of this attack would, I think, even just 5 years ago be seen as beyond the pale. But unfortunately, that's where we are now as a nation. It's
a
not
couple
very
of days
hopeful.
before the Minneapolis murders, the Democrats gathered in Minneapolis and they began their proceedings with a land acknowledgement, was itself a sort of Gnostic prayer and an attack on the West. And I was shocked by. Did you hear it? Did you hear what she said? It's really a condensed assault of the Democratic Party on everything the West has achieved.
And, you know, what it shows is that the Democrats have learned nothing from 2024. And I know we've talked about that on the show before. But when you think about the reaction to what's happened in Minneapolis, when you think about the DNC meeting that was coinciding with the events in Minneapolis, and you see that this Democratic Party has no leaders, it is hemorrhaging money, it is hurtling towards socialism, as you say, I mean, true socialism. And it has more than just the economic critique, this cultural critique of the West, as represented by the land acknowledgement starting out. That is not a party that can win a presidential election. And it doesn't seem to me like any Democrat is willing to say that in a position of authority.
There are none. I'm going to talk with Matt during the break. It'll be on the Big Weekend Pod, per usual, and over at YouTube. And then he'll be back after the break. During the break, we're going to talk about the findings of the Naval Postgraduate School. There have been 119 of these incidents, but no thoroughgoing study of the shooters. On the other side, we're going to talk about Lisa Cook and some other innovations by Team Trump. Matt, after the chair in Minneapolis, I went to look for, has anyone done a study on the shooters? And I found that the Naval Postgraduate School's Center for Homeland Defense and Security has classified 118, now sadly 119 attacks on schools have occurred since 1999. These are different from shootings at school. The Washington Post keeps a different, a shooting can occur at school and not be an attack on the school, but there have been 119 attacks on random people at schools in 26 years. But they don't have any profiling. Do you think the FBI ought to provide the public with a profile of school shooters?
Well, absolutely. And it shouldn't obey the dictates of political correctness in doing so. I mean, just anecdotally, when we look at these attacks, we find that they tend to be committed by younger men in the throes of deep mental illness. And they're usually multiple red flags occur before the shooting. Few people are surprised when one of these young men acts out in these horrific ways. And what I think it speaks to, Hugh, is that we have a serious crisis of mental health in this country, and particularly among young people. And I think we should have a full-scale national research effort. We should devote the HHS, right, to looking into this. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. should be looking into this and to look at the causes of this explosion of mental illness and what can be done to address it. And I think that one measure that needs to be considered is more control of these individuals that we know to be dangerously mentally ill, more paternalistic control to make sure that they're on medication, to make sure they're receiving treatment. Because once they give that up, once they slip the bonds of supervision, they are more likely to commit just heinous acts like we saw this week.
And I think Doug Ducey attempted to do this in Arizona after Parkland and came up with a very good study, but it was a state effort. It's not national, and it did not bring to bear the resources of the federal government. Do you think we'd learn anything if we studied it, or would we just end up saying, I asked Mark Zuckerberg directly once, could you predict who is going to be a killer? And he said no, based upon metadata. But I'm beginning to wonder about that. Do you think we can?
Well, with innovations in AI, it might be easier to predict, or there might be more warning signs. But I think, Hugh, ultimately comes down to the community. And what I've been struck by after every one of these shootings is when you talk to people in the community, you always hear, oh, well, not so much. There was something going on with that kid. There was something going on with the family. And part of the problem is we have such a lack of community in this country that we don't trust each other as much as we used to. And we're more suspicious, and we're less likely to say something if we see something going wrong. And I think that's the norm that we have to reestablish, a sense of community and a sense that if there is someone who is clearly dangerously mentally ill, we cannot be afraid to speak up. I think too many people are afraid to say something.
And we have to get over that. Matt, you're going to be living with JD Vance for a long time. And I'm very happy about that. But, I'll be in retirement and you'll still be in the lists talking about what JD is up to, because the vice president is able. He's very gifted. Here's what he had to say in a clip I saw this morning, cut number 1.
Does Mondami, when you hear him speak, is this a man who feels gratitude for the United States of America? Is this a man who feels grateful for all of the opportunities, the incredible bounty of this country? I don't know the guy, but my sense is he's had a very good life in this country. It would be nice for him to occasionally show a sense of gratitude instead of just attacking the United States for all of its problems.
Now, this is a counterplay in football, Matt. This is not what one expects as a way to attack Mamdani, but he did. After he had gone after the people who attacked prayer yesterday, I think JD is becoming a tribute of common sense and the vast middle in America. What do you think?
I agree. First, Hugh, I have to say there's no retirement allowed for you. You're not going to get out of this. You're going to be talking about JD Vance for a long time, too. Look, I think JD Vance is taking on an increasingly public role in the administration. I think that's good for JD Vance. I think it's good for the administration, because what we find is that in interviews, he's remarkably talented. And in speeches, he's getting better with each additional speech. And he located, as you suggest, a huge vulnerability on the left when all of these figures on the left and in the Democratic Party began mocking the idea of prayer after a mass shooting, a horrific murder of children like we saw this week. And he gave a very, I think, effective post on X where he said, look, you guys have lost all sense of reality here. People pray because they want to help other people. They want to show solidarity with them because they think it works and because, you know what, we know it works. And so, yes, I think he has exhibited an instinct for what issues will always get the 80% of the country on his side, and that's a talent that he shares with his boss, President Trump.
Now, I have a suggestion for a secret sauce, which is shared by Marco Rubio and Tom Cotton and a few other people. They are parents of young children, and the gerontocracy that sits atop America is rapidly losing touch with the concerns of parents, and they're not concerns that I had because I didn't have to raise my kids with devices and with school shootings. Do you think that's going to be a shift in America along the lines of people who have younger children and children in high school to worry about?
Well, I think it's related to the divide over religion. It's the divide over family. If you're married, if you have kids, more and more you are on the right side of the political spectrum. You mentioned the candidate Mamdani for mayor of New York City. His movement is based among young people, childless young people, who come to New York City, and they are far left, and they have no space. They have very few job prospects, but they have a totally different worldview, totally different sense of responsibility and commitment than someone who is married with children. And yes, so I think that's going to be a major divide in our politics going forward, especially as we have fewer marriages now that are actually more secure, the latest research shows. And that's exactly right. Cotton, Rubio, Vance, they're all family men. And so they're going to be able to speak to families in a way that someone like Mamdani, someone like Kamala Harris, someone like AOC just really can't.
Now, I have two more quick issues for you, Matt. One, Lisa Cook and the firing of the Federal Reserve governor. It's a case of first impression. I do not believe the Federal Reserve has a constitutional anchor that allows its governors to be beyond the reach of the president. Do you?
I don't, because the language of the statute is so vague. The act says that the president can fire for cause. And unlike other statutes, it doesn't say what cause is. And that gives the president, I think, incredible leeway here in order to fire Ms. Cook. And so I think also to assert that somehow the Federal Reserve is completely independent is just fictitious. Of course, it's political. All institutions have ended up being political in our day and age. And because it's political, it means that there has to be some amount of accountability for the institution. And I think that's what the president is saying.
And a very, very last question. You and I are Virginians. I am voting for Winsome Sears already, but Spanberger, who's got a lead, is doing her best to give it away by being indifferent to the idiocies of Northern Virginia school districts and the refusal. She said she won't work with ICE. Do you think Winsome Sears can catch up?
Well, I think she's already gained some ground, Hugh, in the polls. She's seized on the trans issue, especially as it relates to public school kids. It's put Spanberger on the defensive. That sort of issue, I mean, it's an 80-20 issue. That hurt the Democrats in 2024. It could hurt Spanberger in Virginia in 2025. So I think until the Democrats have a better answer on this issue, including issues of crime, because Virginia is affected as well by the crime and disorder, they're going to have to look over their shoulders, including at Winsome Sears.
Yeah, I remind people, Ed Gillespie almost knocked off Mark Warner, and there was no money there. I'm hoping the Republicans pay attention at the national level. Matt Continetti, thank you. Follow Matt at Continetti. Read him at the Free Press. Read him in commentary. Read him at the Free Beacon. Follow his stuff at the AEI. And, of course, listen to the Commentary podcast. Time for me to take my Relief Factor. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I take it every day in the first hour. I did my double six today. That means 6 yesterday, 6 today. I'm going to do a triple six because I got to do something before Ohio State thrashes Texas tomorrow. And so I'll do a triple six, which is not normally my habit. I normally take a couple of days off, but I did nothing for 5 days, so I had to really pick up the pace. I might feel a little bit in the hamstrings, but thanks to Relief Factor, the only supplement I take. And there I did, 4 pills and a sip of Trader Joe's water. Why? Because Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega are researched over and over again. They're 4 natural supplements everyone ought to take because they support your body's anti-inflammatory system as well as good heart health. But Relief Factor gets rid of the minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. And you should be doing the former. And maybe you don't do 6 miles. Maybe you only do a sixth of a mile. That's fine. Do something every day. And you're definitely getting older every day. And you're going to discover new aches and pains when you get out of bed every morning as the years go by. Relief Factor is your solution. Call for the starter pack, $19.95, 3-week supply, less than $1 a day at 1-800, the number 4, on the word relief, 1-800-4RELIEF, or go to their website, relieffactor.com. The starter pack is there too at relieffactor.com. I'm about to tell you about 2 sponsors, but please don't turn away because this is really for those who are either over 50, especially for those who are 65 and older, and for people who have parents in that age group, because they are vulnerable to 2 things. They are vulnerable to being hacked and phished, their identity stolen, their paid-off house fraudulently encumbered. They are also vulnerable to all sorts of blackmail and voicemail fraud. They're also vulnerable to spending their money wildly and inefficiently. So that's what my 2 sponsors are about. I call this the senior citizen sponsors, though they're for everyone. You know that an identity theft occurs in the United States every 1 or 2 seconds, and people don't even know it. They click on links that are increasingly impossible to distinguish from the real thing. I'm pretty good at this, but I'm not good enough to go unprotected onto the web. I got a lot of devices. In every studio, if you add up all the devices on which I work, it's probably 30, but I'm protected on all of them because I went through ransomware a few years ago at Studio West, and it's a real nightmare. So WebRoot is something I want to recommend to you unqualifiedly. WebRoot Total Protection or WebRoot Essentials. They've got 2 different sets of offerings. But among the offerings are protection against malware, which gets inside your computer and sees everything you do, including your keystrokes. Protection against ransomware, which took advantage of us. Phishing scams, which are ubiquitous. You'll get a firewall, a network monitor, a web threat shield to block bad websites before they come up. You also get protection of up to $1 million in reimbursement for stolen funds. You get a VPN for yourself, or if you get the bigger program, you get it for up to 10 devices in your home, 10 family members. Right now, you can get 50% off WebRoot Total Protection or WebRoot Essentials if you'll do one thing. Go to webroot.com/Hewitt. 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 We are all living digital lives. Live yours safely. Don't drive dangerous cars. Don't use unprotected devices. Webroot.com. And now consumercellular.com. Do you know how much your parents are paying for cell phones? Did they buy an expensive cell phone plan? Would you check for them, please, with Consumer Cellular? 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Or go to consumercellular.com/you. Now, get them to get their phone bill out and look at it and see what they're paying. And if they don't know where their phone bill is, you can guess they're paying too much. Consumer Cellular has a special deal for people who are 50 and older. That's their target demo, because they know that people 50 years and older do not use that much data. 2 unlimited lines, meaning data as much as they want, 2 of them, for $60 a month. That's $30 for each line unlimited. You can have savings with sacrifice. You can get your parents' savings without sacrifice, but you got to start and use my code HUGH25. Get $25 off, $5 credit on each of your first 5 monthly invoices when you call 1-800-411-4454 or visit consumercellular.com/you. As is the case on most Fridays, Ben Domenech joins me. Ben is, of course, a Fox News contributor. He's editor-at-large for The Spectator. He has his own Substack at The Transom. And, of course, he is the host of the Big Ben podcast, which I never miss. and which is fabulous this week. And I've got to begin, before I even go to that, Ben, are you an Ohio State fan tomorrow or a Texas fan tomorrow?
Well, I've been rooting for Texas for a long time, Hugh. I can't remember if I told you.
And that concludes our interview today.
Well, but I'll tell you this: it's interesting the dynamics that's happened this week around this game, because I was on Texas early in the week, and now the public money has shifted. And now that makes me feel a little bit less confident, because when the public money goes on Texas, bad things tend to happen. and so I'm more nervous about that now.
All right, we'll talk about that next week. Let me ask you now about Janice Dean and whether you've heard from her yet.
So I have not heard from her yet, but I would just say that I expect to, because she and Megan talk usually. I
assume your wife's best friend. So, is it your wife's best friend? Okay.
Yes.
I want people to listen to the Big Ben podcast, so they won't have any idea. Let's talk about your hurricane hubris, Ben. I am a child of Ohio, which had tornado alleys in it, and we had a tornado every 3 or 4 years. And so I'm very leery. When the sirens go off, I go to the basement. In California, you can't do anything about earthquakes. But I've got no experience with hurricanes, and you are indifferent to them, but your wife and 2 girls were not.
No, and this is, and I'll tell you, it really is funny, because in Arizona, you can have these storms, these haboobs come out of nowhere. In fact, they had this happen just this past week.
Just this week, yeah.
And it's insane. I mean, these dust storms that just come out of nowhere and can rip trees out of the ground and things like that. In fact, that happened at my mother-in-law's house, and for whatever reason, the folks in Arizona, they're like, oh yeah, this is just normal. Whereas I find them very, sort of disturbing.
They look like Dune. They look like an extra from Dune.
Yes, exactly. And so it's the same kind of thing with hurricanes. I'm like, it's a Cat 1. Who cares? And so and in this case, it was just no prior tropical storm experience, no prior, we're going to lose all the power and that kind of thing. And I will tell you, I don't think I mentioned this in my monologue, but I did look at the nice Dominion power map the next day and did say to my wife, yep, nobody in the Outer Banks lost power.
But boy, they lost some houses. I'm showing pictures right now on the Salem News Channel. It was not without consequence there.
It was
now,
not.
I got to ask you, though, the key question, when you dumped all your food that you had done the Costco buy for the 2-week family vacation, and I bet you spent more than $500, you were being modest, and you went next door and you dumped.
1 week. That was for 1 week.
Oh, okay,
so
and you dumped it on the unsuspecting neighbor who was a redneck. Why didn't you take the smokes and beers? Why didn't you do it?
Well, honestly, it was just that all I'll be thinking about on the drive home is the fact that that's what I want to be enjoying. But I just told him to pass it on, and I'll tell you, he was extremely grateful. He says, "Man, I love neighbors."
Yeah, I love neighbors. Southern people love neighbors. Now I got to tell you, you went down to Busch Gardens, where my grandkids go occasionally. And I will never get on a roller coaster. I hate them. And and Dwayne loves them, and I hate them. And I think it's a divide in the country that's deeper than red-blue. I mean, there are some people for whom it is a joy and they love it. And you've introduced your daughters to it, and they didn't throw up.
No, not only did they not throw up, but they immediately demanded more and more and wanted to keep riding them, and were asking the next day why they couldn't go back. So I've successfully, if this is a divide, they are definitely on the pro side of it, and they have been doing nothing but tell their friends in the past week about their experience. And the younger one has explained that she could not go on the big bad wolf, but she will next time because she will be tall enough. And so,
I got to say though, when you announced to the world that you are an awesome dad, I said to myself, "Oh, Ben, you have not dealt with teenage girls yet. And when you turn down your college-age daughter and tell her she can't have the car on New Year's Eve because people are drunk and she's not driving to Anaheim, that's when you become an awesome dad, my friend."
Yes.
Now, I want to go to Miranda Devine.
Hubris of youth.
Yeah, I want to go to Miranda Devine. I had no idea that Abby Lowell was suing Hunter Biden for legal fees. Thank you for telling me that. Where did you, how, why?
Well, I guess he now is claiming that he's broke, despite the fact that he, clearly is jetting about the place and certainly doesn't seem to be dressing the part of somebody who's broke. But look, I think this is a game that Hunter has been playing for a long time, of kind of putting his money in different places where people can't access it, and then claiming that it's going to this, that, or the other from my art as opposed to going to me. And I think it's all just a game of hide the ball. And so the fact that he's being sued by Abby Lowell, I think, is one more sign of the Hunter has not changed. Hunter is still Hunter. And I do think it is interesting, and I do think Miranda's right that he has political aspirations, and that this early introduction is part of that. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's going to be interesting to watch.
Let's talk about Miranda a little bit. You introduced me to her. I know I've seen her byline. I've read her for years. I've never heard her before. I didn't know she was a Brit, and I did not know she was that well informed. How do you know Miranda Devine?
So Miranda is actually, she is from Australia, actually.
Okay.
And she was brought up kind of as being someone who played some early roles there in terms of her reporting that got the attention of Rupert Murdoch and others folks, and she eventually made the jump over here to America, and is a very proud and happy American, and loves to cite that whenever a patriotic holiday comes around. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman, and I've had the occasion to sit down with her on more than one occasion. And the one thing I will say about Miranda, and this is not anything, against sort of path of her career, but most people know her because of the context of the laptop and the Hunter story. She's got a much wider range than that, and so it's one of these things where sometimes you get on a story and people want you to keep talking on it. And I will definitely have her back on in the future because I know that she can speak to a lot more than just that. But obviously that's something that has been in the news of late. We wanted to make
the most controversial thing she said that had me stop in my trundling this morning is when she said there is a bottom for New York, meaning that even if Mamdani wins, there's only so low that New York can go. That's not true. I was in New York. I lived there only once in 1980, from March until August or September. Can't remember when I left for law school. I hated it because it was just crime-ridden and awful. New York can plunge into the slough of despair, Ben.
I think that this will be a real test of that moment. I mean, the way that I would say that I do agree with her is I do think the NYPD gives a certain base just in terms of them being a quality police force as opposed to the police forces that are in some of these other cities. Look at the difference in D.C. The simple fact that you have a police force that was operating at 1,000 people short, or even more than that, actually, in some of the assessments, and the difference that can be made. The National Guard's presence. I mean, I have friends who've come into town in the past couple of weeks who are just amazed by the amount of difference that they see in terms of their experience. I think that New York, though, is one of these examples where the left always thinks that they can't break something until it breaks. California thinks that it's invulnerable until everybody who, made it such a forward-looking technological power, starts saying, well, we could do this in Texas instead, and we won't have to put up with all this DEI crap. So I think that there is a bottom that the left tries to find because they try to extract as much money out of the populace in order to, engage in these ridiculous missions. And Mamdani is nothing if not ridiculous.
Well, I think he's an anti-Semitic communist, but he's also in favor of abolishing misdemeanors. Does anyone, do you think he's ignorant or ideologically blind to what that means? Misdemeanors are a big deal in the law.
I think it's a blindness, and I think that it's also one of those things where he's so young, he's so inexperienced, he's had so many different little things that he's tried and failed at in terms of his career to this point. It's bizarre to think about having someone like him in charge of a city like New York. And I think that there's a rude awakening factor that will come with that. At the same time, he does seem to be ideologically committed to this. And I think he's going to be much worse than some of the people who are looking at him and saying, well, he'll be hemmed in by the realities. You can go pretty far down that road before the realities come back to bite you. And
if Curtis were to name 4 deputy mayors, if Curtis Sliwa was to say, here are my 4 deputy mayors, and they were serious people of accomplishment, could he get in the race? 2 seconds, Ben.
I just don't think so. I think New York's
Nah.
too far gone for that.
It's either Eric Adams. I think that's the bottom. It's either Eric Adams or Mamdani. You got to sell me harder on Jerry Jones. There are 32 NFL owners. I'm sure they're all interesting. I thought he was great in Landman, but do I really have to invest an hour in him?
Well, it's more than an hour.
Oh.
It's a multi-part series, so you're definitely not going to watch it. But I think that one of the things that makes it beneficial is all these guys are still alive. You know, Barry Switzer gives extensive interviews. Jimmy Johnson gives extensive interviews. They're all still alive, and they're all still bitter. And they all have these, 30-plus-year-old animosities about everything that played out. And I think you see, basically I would say if you watch that series, you are not surprised by what just happened with Micah Parsons. In fact, this is the guy. This is the guy who would do something that foolish and foolhardy, I think, in terms of a move. And you see it even in the context of the show in a holdout that happens with Emmett. But one of the things that is, I just think, had been lost to my memory simply because at the time I was obviously someone who consumed sports just, through the lens of watching it. But the dramatic effect that he had on media and on the television business. I mean, Fox as a network, quite honestly, probably would not be what it is without the deal that he forced the NFL and their good old boys to cut, because they were losing money on the CBS deal, and he forced them to go to this upstart network in Fox. And they obviously steal the greatest to do it in terms of John Madden and Summerall, and they take over the sport, and it becomes what it is. I think that one thing that is just a sideline story to that is just how much he changed everything about what the NFL was, and that's something that I think is a little lost for people.
Yeah, I don't know if you know, he wrested the whole TV rights from the man who must not be named on air, Art Modell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everyone thought Art Modell was a genius. No, he wasn't. He was almost bankrupt when he sold the team in Baltimore and stole it from Cleveland. Jerry Jones rescued the NFL. So that's in there.
Yeah, and I think, yes, it is. And it's interesting because, look, you remember the games, or at least I remember the games. And so the game footage is, a major part of it. But just the fact that you've got all these guys, coming sort of to the ends of their careers, Jimmy Johnson, sort of semi-retired, Jerry's still active, but obviously, closer to the end, the beginning. It's like it's an airing of grievances in a way. And I just find that to be really interesting and enlightening because they're much more willing to be honest about this stuff. And there's some interesting and dramatic moments in there. There's a scene where Jerry's crying over the grave of his father and reciting bits of Rudyard Kipling. And it's like, this is soap opera, but
all right, you're selling hard, but I'm still got Ludwig to finish. When I'm done with Ludwig, maybe I'll get to that. Ben, I wanted you to come back to give me your take on something. I was on Hannity last night. Jason Chaffetz was sitting in for Sean. I was on a panel with my friends, Mary Catherine Ham and Guy Benson, and we are all four of us, Jason, Mary Catherine, Guy, and Hugh, believers. And I'm a Catholic, and they're different varieties of believers, but they believe in prayer. And we were talking about, I was trying to give grace to people. It's easy to blurt and hurt and say stupid things in the moment when you're on camera or on X. But the assault on prayer is kept up. What do you make of this?
Well, I'll say from the perspective of someone who's prayed a lot, that I think the most stunning thing about it to me is just the absence of a shared common language when it comes to prayer. In the past, I felt like the people who, were criticizing the quote unquote thoughts and prayers concept, at least knew what they were talking about. There's an old Anthony Jeselnik special that's, very crude that talks about this, but I think he has an understanding of what he's criticizing. This time around, I really feel like Democrats are kind of revealing that they don't even understand what the purpose of prayer is. They don't understand why people pray. And that, to me, is almost, more damning than this continued assault, because I think the assault is something that is only going to inspire backlash among people who are believers and who pray on a daily and hourly and minute-by-minute basis. But I also think that it's kind of revealing that they have lost so much of an awareness of something that is so central to the lives of so many Americans. And they did so in a faster time than I think that I ever could have imagined. Keep in mind how much they were citing, the importance of Joe Biden's personal faith as being an aspect that was something to be lauded about him, as in 2020. And in the past, I think, this was something where even if Democrats were not in favor of highlighting this, though this was something that didn't come natural to some of them, it was something where they at least appreciated why this was important to the American people and to so many Christians and believers around the world. Now I don't think that's the case anymore. And that's
not only that, but let me give you my theory. That the Democratic Party was liberal and represented a lot of Catholics, like Italians and Irish and other immigrant groups and other faiths and Eastern European. They have slid from liberal to left. And over there on the way left side are the communists who hate religion and the Leninists who kill people of faith. And I think they've moved from secular absolutism, meaning no religion in the public square, into an anti-religion position because it's so identified with cultural issues about which they are so deeply committed, such as trans ideology, such as DEI, CRT. What do you think?
I'll add one more wrinkle to that, Hugh, I think. And this is, I think that they started to take for granted the black vote based only on racial issues and economic issues, and they no longer respected the black church and the way that has such a strong role to play within the black communities across the country. And I see that in part, frankly, in this stunning announcement that Robert Johnson has given $500,000 to Winsome Sears' campaign in Virginia. He says it's in response, obviously, to that racist sign and everything that came from that. But this is a guy who was, a chief fundraiser for Terry McAuliffe when he was running, is a major Democrat donor. And the fact that he is so repelled by basically, the presence of these, white, more secular women who now animate and guide the Democratic Party to such a great degree, I think that that's the same cohort that's replaced prayer with a lot of yoga and a lot of Pilates and a lot of other things.
I didn't think Winsome had a chance. I'm going to vote for her, obviously, but I thought that given the out year of this cycle, but the idiocy of the Democrats on the schools in Northern Virginia and on the immigration and crime issues, and now their craziness on this prayer.
I've been told by a number of people who pay very close attention to Virginia politics, even more than me, that Abigail Spanberger has problems within the black community, and I think that that's true. And I don't know the degree to which it's going to be a factor, but even if the history sort of is against Winsome in this moment, I do think that Democrats have a real shot that they could botch this thing if they're so out of touch on things that are core to a lot of Americans, regardless of party, and they really run that risk, I think, in this cycle of perhaps having something turn out that gives them another wake-up call, as if they needed another one.
I hope they do. Ben Domenech, thank you. I recommend everyone go get the Big Ben podcast after you've listened to the Big Weekend podcast. And Janice Dean, I think you know where he lives. You go and find Big Ben. Thank you, Ben Domenech. Follow him on X at bdomenech. Time for the market update brought to you by our friends at AmericanFederal.com. Our friends at AmericanFederal.com, founded by Nick Grovich over 44 years ago, they are the experts when it comes to straightforward buying and selling of gold. And they sponsor the market update every day. If you're going to buy gold, do it with Nick and his team because they are no fuss, no muss. Here's the price of gold today. Here's our commission. The commission goes down the more you buy. The commission goes up the less you buy. They also buy your gold if you feel like you need to sell it. And it's very transparent, very efficient. I buy my gold from Nick, but I do it annually. Some people do it quarterly. Some people do it every month. Today, gold closed, or it didn't close. It never closes. At the market close, it was up $42 an ounce to $3,516 an ounce. $3,516 an ounce. And the one guy who told me, don't be surprised if it hits 3,500 is Nick Grovich. And I am surprised. And I don't know what's going on in the world markets, except that there is a great deal of concern about the stability of world markets and the fact that we've got two major wars underway. The Dow was down 0.2 today. The S&P was off 0.64, and the NASDAQ tech heavy was down 1.15%. But gold went up $42 an ounce to $3,516.70. I don't know you're going to get a dip. I do not know if you're going to get a dip. About a month ago, when it was down around 3,300, I thought it was a dip, and I suggest if you're waiting for the dip, I think that's it. And I was right, but I'm not always right, and I don't give financial advice. I always buy gold in January, and so you can start today to always buy gold in September on 9/1 or on 10/1. But call Nick first, 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Make a plan for yourself to diversify into some precious metals. Don't keep them at home. Put them in a safety deposit box, part of a diversified portfolio. Nick is a guy who will guide you well through the ins and outs of gold. This is my Relief Factor bag if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. I took it in hour number 1. I remind you in hours 2 and 3. I'll remind you during the Hillsdale Dialogue as well. I did 2 6s, 6 yesterday, 6 today. I'm going to do another 10K in the morning. That's a trip 6, which I rarely do, but I had to do because I was sitting around the house too much with visitors for 4 days. And I'll probably feel it on Sunday, but that's fine because Relief Factor is there to take care of me. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, omega, natural supplements that help your body's anti-inflammatory system get rid of the minor aches and pains that come from exercise and aging. And you should be exercising, and you're definitely aging. And whether or not it's your back, your neck, your shoulder, your elbow, whatever your exercise is, whether you're a gym rat or a trundler like me, or you're young and you can run fast, Relief Factor is for you. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Ask for the starter pack, $19.95 for a 3-week supply. That's less than $1 a day. That's 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or visit their website at relieffactor.com. The starter pack is there as well, relieffactor.com. My guest is Eli Lake. Eli is a contributor to the Free Press. He is the host of the Breaking History podcast. I never really sell Eli hard enough. I just assume anyone who follows national security knows that there's David Ignatius and Eli Lake and everybody else. And Eli knows this stuff cold. So Eli, here are the 5 topics we're going to cover, and we have 3 segments to do it in. I'm going to let you pick the order. 1, the Israelis erased a whole bunch of the Houthi leadership. 2, Secretary Rubio has banned Abbas, the PA, and the PLO from coming to the General Assembly. 3, Victor Davis Hanson announced on his podcast today that the Egyptians are training 10,000 Palestinians just outside of Gaza in what appears to be their approach to policing Gaza after the takeover. 4, the Israelis are going to take Gaza City, unless I'm a fool, because they are staging for it. And then 5, Democrats usually considered moderate, like Jake Sullivan, the former national security advisor under President Biden, and Adam Smith, ranking Democrat on House Armed Services Committee, have gone left and anti-Israel recently. Your choice. Where do you want to start?
Well, they're all related. These topics are all about sort of the domestic political implications, the diplomatic implications, the regional implications, and the on-the-ground war implications of the current war between Hamas and Israel. And I think what it's showing is, politics is all about drawing distinctions between the two parties. What Jake Sullivan, and it's been a pattern. We saw it earlier this month with Crooked Media, the Obama Pod Bro guys and Pod Save America. We're seeing a pattern. The Democratic Party is losing faith with Israel. There are some people who will tell you that that'll change once there's another prime minister, but I'm not so sure. I think they're responding to their base that has made this the number 1 issue in the world from the perspective of a Democratic Party activist. And right now we're seeing lots of people who I would have considered Jake Sullivan pretty staunchly in the sanity wing of his party when it comes to geopolitics. And right now, by saying that he favors cutting off aid, which is, they kind of did it kind of stealthily at the end of the Biden administration with Israel and the military equipment. That to me tells you everything you need to know. As for Rubio not allowing Abbas to come to New York City, I think that is a direct response to the threats from the European leaders to recognize a Palestinian state. It's purely symbolic, but I think the negotiators that are trying to release the hostages, I don't think Hamas was ever serious about it, would say that the decision to make that announcement basically ended any chance for a negotiated settlement on the hostage. Hence, we have Gaza City. That's why.
Well, let's go to Gaza City after we talk about the Houthis.
Yeah.
I think you've got to be a moron to attack Israel. And
Yeah.
I'm not invoking biblical themes. I'm simply stating the obvious. They are a superpower with the ability to project power and the will to do so. They are a nuclear superpower, and they will put up with a lot of stings, but they will not put up with continuing attacks. And boy, do they have the Houthis number. They blew them all up. And I haven't seen the final damage assessment. What do you think it is?
I think what we're seeing, I don't know what the final damage assessment is, but I think what we have to start talking about is an intelligence superpower, which is that what Israel has shown in the last, really last year or so, is that it can find you and it can finish you wherever you are. And that is an amazing kind of power to have. So the Israelis didn't have any particular intelligence on the Houthis. The Yemen isn't a country of interest, wasn't historically a country of interest really for the Mossad. They went to school and they were able to do something that the United States, the United Kingdom, the people who are supposed to be ensuring the safety of free navigation on our international waters were not able to do, and that is to take out the Houthi leadership. It's extraordinary, but it's part of a pattern. And what Israel's doing, the technology it has, the tradecraft, the practices that it has, I would say that you have to think of it as a kind of an intelligence superpower, and it is now the envy, I think, of all of the other kind of aspiring powers and currently great powers.
I'm shrugging off the old model, the post-war model,
Yeah.
Eli, which said there were only the United States, the Soviet Union, China. Now there's Israel, and the other ones are all second tier. India, Pakistan, they're nuclear powers, UK, and France. But really, there are four superpowers, and we've got one on our team. I like that. Do you think America realizes that?
I think that Trump realizes, I think Marco Rubio realizes that. And I would even say JD Vance, who I have disagreements with on his foreign policy, has said that if you look at JD Vance's Quincy Institute, I don't like the Quincy Institute one bit, but the speech that he gave there, he acknowledges Israel is a great ally and a great regional power, and we should try to empower it.
Eli, I think there is a bad rap against the vice president on Israel. And I base it only on what he has told me on this show. During his Senate campaign, when I interviewed him repeatedly, he's been on this program. He's repeatedly always said, we should not tell Israel what's in its best interest. It is up to Israel to determine what's in its best interest. What is it that triggers alarm? I mean, compared to Jake Sullivan and Adam Smith, he's David Ben-Gurion.
That's a great line. I think in JD Vance's case that this harmonizes with this kind of new American nationalism, which is that the United States doesn't want to get involved in nation building. It doesn't want to get itself involved in kind of endless conflicts. It wants allies who are winners and allies who are capable of defending themselves. And that, in the case of Israel, that advances America's national interest. So I think that is, in many ways, consistent with JD Vance. What I'm concerned about with JD Vance is that he, I think, has gone above and beyond a kind of skepticism about the American policy towards Ukraine to a hostility towards Zelensky, who I think is the heroic figure in the conflict. That does not mean, by the way, that I think that JD Vance has illusions about Vladimir Putin. I'm not in any way questioning this U.S. combat veterans' patriotism or loyalty. I find that kind of politics gross when I was, kind of a moral panic during Russiagate. It's just to simply say that I think he's got Ukraine wrong, and I'm worried about some of his skepticism about NATO. I think that NATO is salvageable, even though it has problems, and I think that what we're seeing with Trump's policy now is a pivot towards a kind of mend it, don't end it there. But when it comes to Israel,
post-Trump party, in the post-Trump party, there will be Tom Cotton, there will be Marco Rubio, and there will be JD Vance. Those are the three towers of the post, and maybe Elise Stefanik, but I doubt it. Of those three, I think Cotton holds the height in the legislative branch, and that Rubio and Vance are going to be of one mind on the world. I'm not worried at all about I'm worried about the Democrats becoming anti-Israel and anti-everything.
They are anti-Israel. Not becoming, they are anti-Israel at this point. There are pro-Israel Democrats, but they are losing ground, and they have shown that they are willing to share the party and effectively appease the voices that have momentum in their party right now that are well beyond simply kind of being critical of Israel. They always sort of say, oh, you can't be critical of Israel. What are you talking about? Of course you can be critical of Israel. It's a nation state like any other. It's an ally like we have. We can be critical of our allies. It is basically adopting a narrative that the end point is the negation of Israel, because that's where Zoran Mondani is. And that leads to, they dress it up. They say, well, maybe we want a binational state. What's wrong with, and they turn it into kind of a civil rights issue or something like that. It's ahistorical. It is, again, literally adopting the narrative. And we're seeing it in the language about the Gaza
Eli,
war.
we're going to come back on that work. It's anti-Semitic, too. Let's underline that. It is late August. I'm going to make a prediction, Eli. By the second anniversary of the massacre of 10/7, Israel will have control of all of Gaza, and Gaza City will be leveled or in large part emptied of everyone, and Hamas will be dead, and the hostages will be back or lost. They are not going to turn to the left or the right. They have set their face against Hamas, and they are going in. I don't know if VDH is right about the 10,000 Palestinians being trained by the Egyptians on the other side of the wall. But what do you think of my prediction? I think that in Netanyahu's head, he is going to get this done by the 2-year anniversary.
I hope that you're right. It has been dispiriting because I do think that right now you have to factor in the fact that I think the Israeli nation is exhausted. I think the IDF is exhausted. But if this is the last push to eradicate Hamas and make sure that they cannot govern Gaza, which I think has to be an end state of the goal, then Bibi's got to do what he's got to do. And the counsel from, I think, very uncomfortable pro-Israel liberals that you have to count for global opinion. We're well beyond that, unfortunately, at this point. I think that Israel has lost who they're going to lose, and that the only way out, both for their international reputation of the Jewish state, but also for the national security of the Jewish state, is to focus on the goal of ridding Gaza of Hamas. That's why this war is being fought. It's why, Israel can't give up. And it's sadly because of the tactics of Hamas, it places so many civilians and children in harm's way. And
they're letting them leave, though. This is, I get very angry with the left in America and broadcast especially. Berlin 1945 is what Gaza City is going to look like, except Hitler wouldn't let the Germans leave, and Hamas is trying not to let the Palestinians leave. But Israel's doing everything they can to feed them and get them out. But they've got to go into Gaza City. They've got to. It's like leaving Hitler in the bunker.
Yes, well, absolutely. I mean, you could say the Hitler of Gaza, Sinwar, has been dead for a year, but or almost a year. But yes, you're absolutely right. They have to make sure that Hamas cannot stand up after the last Israeli soldiers leave and say, we won and we're still in charge, because then you don't know when, but you can guarantee there will be another 10/7. So these are the stakes at this point. And
do you understand Victor Davis Hanson to be correct that Egypt is training 10,000 Palestinians from the West Bank, from the PA, to police?
I don't know that, so I don't want to go beyond my skis, but there's an argument that it would make a lot of sense if you're Sisi to do something like that, because what do the Egyptians want? The Egyptians don't want, they want to end the war as well. They would like to see Gaza return to something that isn't a threat to them. That's why they don't let the Palestinian refugees into Egypt, because they don't want Palestinians. They don't want a Muslim Brotherhood faction in their country running around. That's not what Sisi wants.
What does Qatar do?
Well, I mean, at this point, I think that Qatar has to end their double game. I would like them to do that. It's interesting that the Qataris about a month ago signed on to a statement that said Hamas cannot be in power at the end of this war. But I'm not holding my breath at this point. You're still seeing, that's the one kind of holdout. And I think that they've been trying to play this double game. And that's the one area where I'd like to see stronger U.S. diplomacy from the Trump administration. The U.S. can end the double game in a minute.
I've been told that. I've also been told Israel can end it in a minute, but they didn't want to. And that for decades, Israel wanted Qatar to do what they were doing, which is fund Hamas, because Hamas was going to evolve. So a strategic error, but not to blame our, I think Qatar has got a special ally denomination in the United States currency.
Yes.
But they will throw them out if we tell them to throw them out, right?
Yeah, and also there's enough leverage the United States has with the special status of a major non-NATO ally, as well as the fact that our very important military bases in Qatar. The United States has leverage with the Qataris, and it's just a matter of applying it, in my view.
Okay.
And I also think that it's different because they don't. It's no longer like who do we bet on, Israel or Iran? Iran is out of the game at this point, so I think that there are potentially a lot of openings there for the Qataris to kind of get them back into the community of nations, but you got to play that card.
And I also want to press you on Syria and Lebanon. I think
Yeah.
Israel's drawing a very hard line on both places, and good for them. They have the leverage. They're the superpower.
Lebanon is the underreported, unwritten, great success story of this war. Hezbollah is a shell of itself. The Lebanese government has asserted itself to the point where it is now doing something that we've been asking it to do for 40 years, which is to disarm the remnants of Hezbollah. The Iranians no longer have influence. There was an extraordinary moment a week and a half ago when the national security advisor for the Iranian regime, Ali Larijani, was told to turn his plane around and basically said, "We don't want you here." That's amazing if you think about what the relationship between Iran and Lebanon, which it basically had held hostage a year ago. So that is a testament to the success of Israel's war. And I'm very worried about Syria because of the nature of the Al-Jara government. But on the other hand, I think it's better than Assad. The Iranians don't have the influence and the power that they had before. So those are success stories as I see it. And hopefully we can see a success story in Yemen now that their leadership is no longer.
You know, Eli, you have enough editors with Barry and everyone else. But if you did for Lebanon in breaking history what you did for Iran in breaking history,
Yes.
I would welcome it, because I just don't profess to understand, other than there are Maronites and Druze, there are Sunni and Shia, and there are a bunch of Alawites, and there are all sorts of different people, and they managed to get along forever, and now they don't, right?
Right. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, this is another one of these, like the Palestinians kind of ruined Lebanon in a way when Arafat and the PLO went there after Black September in the 1970s, and it's been downhill ever since. But that's a good recommendation, Hugh. You're getting me thinking. That's very good.
Well,
I'm happy to
Breaking
do that.
History is a great podcast. I want more people to listen to it. Eli, thank you for your time on
Thank
the
you,
beginning
Hugh.
of a long weekend. Have a great Labor Day. You certainly do work hard enough. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back. Tarzana Joe is here. As you head out on your Labor Day travels, remember as well, Dr. Larry Arnn coming up. If you're in your car with a Hillsdale Dialogue, we're taking a break from Winston Churchill's Second World War, 6 volumes, because we occasionally do that with Dr. Arnn to look back over the past few months at the biggest stories of the period of times. Joined by the Poet Laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. A serious poem for a serious week. Death comes in many guises. Several come to mind, diseases and disasters, and none of them are kind. We wake up from our sleeping, the morning songbird sings, knowing that the touch of death is waiting in the wings. I wish I had the knowledge, I wish I had the power to see beyond the moment and to name the day or hour. Poets are obsessed by death. We've been since we were born. One did not go gentle, and he refused to mourn. We die but once, he seemed to say, peaceful or infernal, and after that one passing, then we are eternal. I wish I had that poet's faith. I wish I had his art. But cry if you refuse to mourn, or else you have no heart. And pray if you know words to pray. Ask comfort for the grieving, that they may bring you tears and prayers, for friends, we'll all be leaving. That's Be Leaving by Tarzana Joe.
Ah, nicely done, Joe. And I was wondering if you would take on the challenge, because it is a challenge. I said last night on Fox, it is almost impossible to say anything of comfort to grieving people, family, friends, teachers, community. It's very easy to blurt and hurt. So it's just so easy to say stupid things. That's why Rabbi Kushner used to say, show up and shut up after a tragedy. But I think your poem is one that might actually help. So that's
you
done.
speculated about why this attack on prayer. And, the greatest minds that ever lived have wrestled with the problem of evil. How in such a world of good and beauty that evil can exist. And, the left has the answer. There is no good. There is no God. There is no evil. There's just narrative. There's just what we say. And they've solved the problem, and you just should shut up and listen to them. And
we're not
that's
going
they've
to.
gone wrong.
We're going to go to tarzanajoe.com and write leave. I will send everyone tarzanajoe.com for that poem. And if you need a poem for any occasion, happy, I hope, or sad, a farewell at work or a coming or a anniversary or a wedding, Tarzana Joe's your man. Write to him at tarzanajoe@reagan.com, tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Rates are reasonable, and he's written thousands of poems for thousands of Hugh Hewitt listeners over 20 plus years. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Hugh.
Stay tuned. The Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn is next on most of these radio stations.